You are all live.
All right, I want to thank you all for coming in tonight. I thought there would be three things that we would talk about. We would start with the Community Resource Officer General Orders, which were on the commission agenda. The last agenda was kicked over till the July the 25th meeting to see if we could spend a little more time and see if we can come to some resolution in terms of the difference. Well, welcome, Commissioner Jackson. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Uh,
Sorry I'm late.
No problem. And then to talk about the meeting on the 31st to kind of see where we are and whether we've got everything ready to go. And I want to apologize to Commissioner Jackson for setting that date, a date that she's not going to be able to attend, unfortunately. Apologize for that in our rush to get this done, to get back to the council in a timely fashion. We didn't
I
check with
understand
everybody.
enthusiasm, Chair. No problem. I'm sorry
All
I'll
right.
miss it, but I know it'll be taped, so thank you.
Thank you. And then the last thing we might spend a little time on is to talk about what the ad hoc might continue working on. It's an ad hoc, so it's not a permanent standing committee. So we have very specific assignments that we work on for periods of time. And I wanted to explore what some of those might be. But let us start with Community Resource Officer General Orders, which will be on it's scheduled to be on the next commission agenda. We're lucky to have Jose speak a little bit to it at our last meeting. But Lieutenant Toribio, I don't know if you said you had the one issue, which was where the disagreement was that you were able to put on the screen. I was wondering whether or not Ms. Montgomery could allow you to do that.
Yeah, I think I should. I have an option to share my screen, so I'll try that now. So just to give some context, and then at the end of this meeting, what I'll do is I'll push out copies of these documents to everybody in this meeting, because I think there might be some people here who weren't in the last one who maybe aren't going to have documents to fully reference. So just to quickly summarize, the prior or ex Commissioner Shea compiled in a document all of the changes that were made from the original community policing general order that was approved by the commission. There were issues that arose based on conflicts with our memorandum of understanding, and then just some logistical issues that were not feasible. So what ended up happening is another ad hoc convened, and that was an ad hoc that I was a part of, Mr. Dorado as well. So there were some very fruitful discussions, and I'll let the document speaks for itself, in that it summarizes all of the verbiage that was changed and agreed upon and compromised on. However, there is primarily one component that we kind of reached an impasse, and it had to do with projects that are created and maintained by our community resource officers. So with that context, let me share my screen, and then I will pull up one second. Okay, and I will pull up the exact verbiage.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, just give me 1 sec. It's trying to share. Okay, so let me know if you're able to see the screen, and I'm going to zoom in so you guys can see. So there's language here that has the department's verbiage, and what I'll do is I'll highlight them so you can see the difference. So the blue highlight, this is going to be the department's verbiage, and then below will be what the community proposed to be the verbiage. So as it's up, and let me make it a little bigger so folks can see. How's the size of the text? Is everybody able to read it okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so to contextualize this, let me explain what this section of the general order is. So this is specifically discussing roles of a community resource officer and specific responsibilities that they have. And in question is projects that a CRO needs to have open that is focused on a neighborhood council priority. Okay, so I'll start with the community's text. And what was proposed by the community was that a CRO, community resource officer, needs to have at least one project centered on a neighborhood council priority per assigned beat. And CROs are allowed to overlap beat projects as needed. They are to work with neighborhood councils to prioritize and schedule out projects, with those centered on violence taking higher priority. And it's incumbent on each CRO to explain to each respective neighborhood council the rationale behind project selection and mapping. So what this in a sense is saying is that a CRO is required to have it in at least one open project that is centered on a neighborhood council priority per beat that they're assigned. So let's say that I'm a community resource officer and I'm assigned to, say, for example, beat 31 and 32. So I have 31XYZ and 32X and Y. And I'm required to have one per beat.
You know where they're at.
Not for the subdivision, but one for 31 and one for 32. And that those two projects that I have open need to be on respective neighborhood council priority list. Okay, so that was the language from the community, and that stemmed from the importance that a CRO who is representing a beat continually has an open project that's centered on what's determined to be a priority from the neighborhood council. Okay, so that is the verbiage that is was pushed by the community. The department has significantly different language. Okay, and what the department is stating is that the bureau, each bureau of field operations 1 and 2. So to contextualize that, we have a group of community resource officers assigned to Bureau of Field Operations 1, which is essentially North and West Oakland, and then Bureau of Field Operations 2, which is East Oakland. And what the department is saying is that each BFO has one project centered on a neighborhood council priority at all times. So instead of each CRO having one project that's open, that's based on a neighborhood council priority, each BFO as a whole has one that's focused on a neighborhood council priority. So you can see that that is significantly different. Instead of saying that each CRO has an open project based on a neighborhood council priority, it's saying that the CROs as a whole per Bureau of Field Operations needs to just have one centered on a neighborhood council priority. And so the reason for that is It's multiple reasons. One, it's staffing. We simply don't have the staffing to assign a community resource officer to each beat, much less each sub beat or subdivision of a beat. Second, projects that are undertaken by the community resource officers are more often than not done in a squad-based manner, meaning there's a project revolving around issue X. And instead of that being, let's say, for example, we'll say that it is on beat 32. Instead of that project being worked on only by the beat 32 CRO, it's being done in conjunction with the entire Bureau of Field Operations CROs as a team. That often involves not only just the community resource officers, but our crime reduction teams, ceasefire, special resources sections as a whole, working on those projects. So because of the team-based nature of how CROs handle projects, which are prioritized by violence, they take kind of a communal effort, not just amongst the CROs, but other divisions of the department. It becomes necessary to limit the number of open projects that can be feasibly worked on. Okay, so the concern here was, well, why can't we just have open projects and we kind of get to them when we get to them? And the reason that we opted not to do that is it kind of cheapens the project if we have a project open just for the sake of being open that isn't given attention that it's going to require. And so we felt that it was best to codify in policy something substantive, something that is practical and tangible and can be worked, versus just adhering to verbiage and opening up projects because it's required, but then not giving them their due time and their due efforts. So those are the differences in the department's position and the community's position, and we kind of reached an impasse there. And I see a hand, Ms. Jackson.
Yes, is that all right with you, Chair?
Sure. Mhm. Go
Okay,
ahead.
great. So I want to beat the drum right behind former Commissioner Jose Dorado and say that neighborhoods are in crisis, and the CROs have not been as productive as they might have been over the last couple decades. And so this effort is to really not only try to get more productivity and impact out of them, but to ensure that we can move some agendas ahead. Now, I recognize staffing issues, they only seem to be getting worse. So can you tell us what can be committed to? Because I see this, maintain one project, but in terms of all of the CROs in the city, is there a commitment to, if we can't staff every single one, to kind of round robin and quarterly shift, or use the prioritization of violence as the intercedent? I'm just trying to figure it out, because the reasoning will always be able to be that we're short-staffed, and I want to figure out, how do we still make impact recognizing the short staffing?
Yeah, if I may, Toribio here again. Okay, lot to unpack there. In sentiment, that is a good idea, kind of like a rotating scheme. But one of the things that it's even mentioned here in the policy is the importance of consistency and stability in roles. So we're obviously looking for, when someone comes over to the CRO program, that they come with the intention of a commitment of a certain number of years, and it's not just like a fleeting assignment. And in conjunction with that, we think it's also important that that specific assignment remain consistent as well. So instead of Officer X being assigned for a period of time to beat 17 and then going to beat 15 and then going to beat 8, that they're given time in their role, and that helps kind of foster a better relationship, not only with the neighborhood council, but with just the people that comprise their beat as well. So what ends up happening, though, in order to extend coverage as much as possible, is that officers end up being assigned more than one beat. So you'll have a CRO who is, instead of just being dedicated to 17, they'll have 17 and 18, and so they'll have multiple beats to which they're assigned. One thing I failed to mention in the explanation here is having a project that is in SARA, which is the current system or database or ideology behind running a project, is just one component. So because obviously there are needs in each specific beat, which is why we have CROs to begin with, to work on beat specific issues. Needs aren't just put by the wayside only because of a requirement that they have one open neighborhood council priority specific project per the BFO. It doesn't preclude CROs from addressing issues, particularly violent ones, if the need arises, but it doesn't necessarily mean that a project needs to be open for it. It could be just maybe some directed enforcement, or whatever the step can be taken to address an issue, be it something that is just coming up or something that is longstanding, but it may not necessarily require a project to be open. And we're looking for flexibility in this policy to prevent kind of these numerous projects from opening up when they're not either required or not going to be able to be given the attention due to the priority of the other project.
Thank you for your response. One of the questions that maybe will be helpful, is there a strategic plan for the Bureau of Field Operations? Because if there were a plan that prioritize this or that, then maybe we would just be kind of moving in lockstep. I feel like the fluidity or the flexibility that OPD may need needs to be either written in here, because we have to capture what the commitment must be, because we as policy writers want to know how to hold accountability, and we can only do that with data based upon reasonable. I mean, we're not trying to knock you down or out, but we also need to ensure that our community residents are feeling like they're being heard and agendas are moving forward.
Yes, for sure. There was, let me share a different document which breaks up more the an explanation, and I don't know if this would be added in a footnote, but just give me 1 second. I'll share a different document, and this is something again that I will push out for folks. Okay. So this is what was, I'm sorry, Mr. Dorado, do you have a comment?
No, go ahead and finish.
Sure. So we thought it was important, and we stated this in the last ad hoc to like it's quite a big jump, right? To go from what is requested by the community that each beat has its own open project that is focused on a priority from just one from each BFO. We thought it was important and incumbent on the community resource officers to explain why that's the case for each neighborhood council. The selection of a project is going to be prioritized by the severity of the danger to the community. So it's going to violent priorities are always going to take top priority. And typically that's kind of how they work when neighborhood councils create their priority lists. They triage or they set their list based on the severity of the crime or the harm to the community, or it could also be based on the rate at which a project can be cleared. So there are different components that are weighed in on what sets a neighborhood council priority. For the selection of the project from the BFO CROs, again, we just feel that it's incumbent on the CROs to express to the beats that comprise the BFO that the priority is going to be heavily influenced by the level of violence that the project is attempting to address.
So let me see if I can understand. So it's the community resource officers who will be choosing the projects, not the neighborhood councils.
So there are different methods that CROs are assigned projects. It could be something from their chain of command. It could be something from the chief. It could be a myriad of things. This specific talking point has to do with the project source coming from the neighborhood council. So this doesn't mean that CROs are only to have one open project per BFO. That's not the case. CROs are going to have multiple projects open. Is what this is specifically stating is that at least there has to be at least one open project at all times that is focused on a neighborhood council priority.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and I think there was a part of the discussion also was the monitoring or accountability of the officers in carrying out the projects. Was there not a question about how they would be monitored and guided and corrected if around these projects?
I don't recall that specifically, or if it was, it wasn't anything that the ad hoc didn't come to a consensus on. But I'd have to scrub the policy to look specifically for that. I do know that in our performance appraisals for our community resource officers, there are metrics that are specific to their role that's different from, say, a patrol officer or someone who's assigned to investigations. There are metrics specific to each division in the department that are used in evaluating an officer's efficiency.
Okay, go ahead, Jose.
Yeah, you know, it was the use of the word jump that was really stood out to me, because it's a huge jump from having neighborhood councils determine what is the most important issues in their beat, and have the CRO work on them in a very specific way. That is, taking them through the SARA process and having one priority, one project per BFO. we're talking about only 2 projects for the entire city versus having neighborhood councils determine what are the most important priorities in their beat and having the CRO work on those. And I don't buy, never have, about the staffing issue. One of the things that made it really clear was a study by David Mohammed and ex-DC Chris Bolton that established that half of the officers that are being dispatched out of 911 are going to nonviolent, non-criminal calls. So I don't buy that. I think it's a matter of deployment and effective deployment. And I'll give you a quick example. When my neighbor was murdered a block from me, David Schneider, a year ago, there were 19 officers there for 5 hours. He had already been shot. He was already passed. I don't understand why 19 officers had to be there for 4 hours, 4 or 5 hours. So one of the things I'm looking forward to is the study that's going to be done by the Inspector General on specifically that, on OPD staffing. So I'm very, very interested to see what conclusions come out of that study in terms of OPD's deployment. So I don't buy the staffing reason for not having CROs work on beat priorities. The other part of this is that historically, OPD has used CROs as almost kind of a reserve. They're the first ones assigned to demonstrations. They were the ones being pulled off to work in the Violent Crime Operations Center. They're now being pulled off to work on CRT projects. They should be the lead in terms of, that's their job, in terms of focusing on beat priorities as determined by the neighborhood council. And I'm not saying, let me make clear, these priorities should be very specific. And by that, I mean, it's not take care of all the drugs houses in the beat. It should be done in a very specific way according to SMART principles, specific, measurable, got a timeline. All of that should be written up with the collaboration of the CRO, so that it is something that is measurable, that is specific, that does have a timeline, that fits right into the SARA process. Scan, analyze, respond, and assess. And this operation of putting together a priority and writing it up and having the CRO focus on it, in my opinion, is the key to getting a handle on crime issues in the beats, as well as quality of life issues, but more so crime issues in the beats. So staffing, I don't buy. The squad-based reason, I don't buy that either, because if in fact it's a priority that spans 2 or 3 or 4 or 10 beats, there's no reason why, if in fact the CROs are allowed to do their jobs and not being pulled off for this reason and that reason, there's no reason why they cannot and should not be collaborating on such a serious issue that it spans several beats. So working in conjunction, working together should be a natural part of their job. There shouldn't be, that's not a reason that it's quote squad-based. They should be working together anyhow, particularly on serious issues that span several beats. And
So,
go ahead.
so I think that brings us back up to the point where the disagreement emerged and where it was then sent to the commission. Lieutenant Toribio, you thought that there might be some room for coming to a different conclusion tonight?
No, I think that the positions are fairly stated. I can obviously report back to my executive command and reiterate that the community is adamant about its position. I do think it, and I do see Mr. Garcia Acosta's hand up. And if I may just respond to a couple things that Mr. Dorado brought up. First, sir, I apologize about your neighbor. I don't know that incident or what necessitated the need for the number of officers. I do know that particularly on scenes of a homicide, those require an extreme level of care and diligence and a lot of resources, be it for preservation of evidence or maintaining integrity of a crime scene. I can't speak to that incident in particular, but I apologize, one that had happened, and that the perception is that it appears in your eyes that there was a lot of wasted resources. Having come from patrol as a watch commander in both BFO 1 and 2, I do know that when those scenes were run, I was always mindful of the utilization of our resources, and primarily understanding that it does require a lot of people to do things and to do things right. Regarding the use of CROs for other duties outside of their primary duties, the department does recognize that it is actual. There are components, and that is acknowledged in the policy that was agreed upon in the ad hoc, and a means of tracking CRO efforts. There's a monthly memo that is codified in policy that's required, where it's incumbent to explain the duties of the CRO and where time is spent when it's spent outside of their primary duties. So while we acknowledge that, yeah, people are going to get pulled, there is accountability written in the policy where we need to be very open and make it available where people can see exactly where resources are being utilized when they're not spent on their primary assignment. And lastly, back to the projects, the kind of the crux of all this, the policy verbiage, as the department is hoping to have accepted, doesn't limit it to one project. It's just saying that at a minimum we have to have one project per BFO. That doesn't preclude a CRO from opening additional projects that are focused on neighborhood council priorities, but that's something that individually is going to need to be determined through the CRO working with their neighborhood council.
I see. Commissioner Garcia-Acosta.
Thank you, Chair. One, I wanted to acknowledge there was a comment in the chat, and I think there was some sentiments along the lines of what the community member, Mr. Jose Dorado, was speaking of in terms of deployment and how CROs get pulled into different areas. Risa says that the community language may be trying to address the lack of trust in OPD's ability to prioritize. It's hard to see that OPD actually knows how to prioritize when we see things like OPD sending officers to a peaceful protest, along the same lines that Mr. Dorado was speaking on in terms of how they get pulled. So I just want to, one, acknowledge that, but two, it's clear that given the limitations of the department, staffing issues, but the needs of the community and the importance of these efforts, it's clear why there's an impasse, right? And so I'm wondering, what, from the department's perspective, what would be something that would be more of a, and Lieutenant, this is something you have to take back to the executive staff, but what would be something that's more practical, that would be something meeting a little bit more in the middle? Because it does seem like it is quite a jump to be able to looking at beat specific projects versus BFO specific projects. And I understand that it doesn't limit y'all to just one project per BFO and that you guys could, take on additional projects. But if the policy only requires one project, it's my guess that the department's probably only going to take on one project, especially given the challenges that the department's facing as well too. So I also would like to explore maybe something, that we could meet in the middle. The BFOs, when you look at all the different neighborhoods within a BFO, there's just so many different micro neighborhoods in Oakland with so many different needs. It's really hard for me to even wrap my mind around like what a singular project amongst a whole BFO would actually look like. And I also want to acknowledge that, some of, and much of what you are saying in terms of, the capacity issue and taking on multiple projects per piece, like, it is a challenge. So I'm wondering, in terms of moving forward, how do we explore something where there may be some middle ground, some type of, give and take between the two proposals so that we can try to move this forward in a way that meets community's needs, even if it feels like it's going to be a stretch for the department. I think we need to aim high and not lower the bars, because as soon as we lower that bar to a really low threshold, I find it really hard to believe that the department is going to find themselves motivated to go above and beyond that threshold. So I just want to make that point. Thank you.
Thank you for that. A couple things on that. What becomes like something that's constantly being brought up is the uniqueness of issues or concerns of a community. So at a certain neighborhood council meeting in one beat, there may be a specific issue that is very unique just to kind of that group. And then there may be other issues that are maybe common among other groups or neighborhoods, or beats. And all that to say is that's where the value of the CRO assigned to a specific beat comes in, because they're going to have that intimate relationship with the neighborhood council to be able to work on those specific things. As we look at this language that's being discussed now, this is for a very certain component of that. And because CRO group in a BFO is required per policy, per OPD language, to have one neighborhood council priority specific project open, doesn't preclude and doesn't say that CROs don't need to worry about anything else that's specific to their beat. It just means that there has to be a SARA project open that is related to a neighborhood council priority in the BFO. So the message isn't going to be, hey, I know I'm your beat 5 CRO, and we have an open project now that has to deal with robberies on beat 8, so I can't address any beat 5 issues. That's not the intention of the language, nor the message that we're trying to convey at all. It's, look, there's going to be like value and care to open projects. And what the last thing we want to do is have a bunch of open projects where they're open just to be open, but we can't address them. And it doesn't mean that we're not working to resolve beat specific issues. It just means we may not have a project open for it at the time. It doesn't preclude work from being done on it, from CROs reporting on the status of priorities. It just means that administratively within SARA, the requirement for the unit is that there's one per BFO.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I think
lastly, another point Mr. Garcia Costa made, I'll absolutely again express the concern to our command, and that the request was made for further compromise on the department side. I did note that point that you made as well.
Yeah, I think we've come to the same impasse. Let me ask one other question, though. There's no measure of the time that a project could be open. I mean, if we could in some way work with the question of how long a project would be open, then it would have to be dealt with within a certain period of time. I don't know if that would adjust the load in some way or another, or how it was handled.
Yeah, by virtue of the system that's in place in the SARA model, there are methods in place in the model that are gonna establish those timetables. So that's the good thing about it, right? Instead of saying like, hey, each project we're gonna say takes a month. It's, hey, depending on the scope of the project, this is something that can be handled in a month, or this is something, this is going to be like a 6-month thing. And kind of the loop of what SARA does in continually, having responses that are delivered by the CROs and then analyzing the outcomes, it all kind of like circles back in loops, and there's a constant reevaluation of the timetable, and all that is done in conjunction with the neighborhood council. There are updates, and this is codified in the policy where CROs work with the councils to deliver updates on projects, and that's where feedback is received on, hey, you know what, should we reevaluate the timetable for this? Are we scrapping the responses that we've done? Are we repeating the responses because we had a good measurable outcome from it? So in terms of project duration, I think those are going to be driven by the projects themselves in conjunction with the CROs working with the neighborhood councils to make those determinations.
I see. I'm afraid I don't see any direction forward other than to go ahead, Jose.
Yeah, I've got a hard stop, but I wanted to make one last point before I left, and that is that OPD made a curious argument in our ad hoc where we were talking about the SARA process, and that is that they put forth the argument that they were concerned that the CRO would be subject to discipline if in fact the project was not advancing quickly enough. And my response to that was, that's not an argument that makes any sense, in that the language in the proposed policy says that the CRO will report back to the sponsoring neighborhood council at the completion of each step, meaning that the CRO is the one that determines when each step is completed. So there isn't any exposure to any discipline, because in fact the CROs are in control of when the SARA step, the scan, analyze, respond, assess step is completed. So there isn't any exposure. So I just thought I'd make that point in terms of the duration of the projects. They'll just take as long as they take, again, so long as the CRO is working steadily on them and determines when each step is completed, and then has the obligation to report back to the sponsoring neighborhood council at that point. So I wanted to make that point before I left, and I'm sorry, I have another meeting that I have to go to, and my apologies, but I have to take off. Lieutenant Tribio, good.
It's in 24X.
So yeah, I will convey that. But again, good to see everybody. I will talk to everybody soon, and thanks for having this.
Appreciate that. So Lieutenant Toribio, did I understand you to say that there is a timeline that comes out within SARA, separate from the decision that the CRO would make about when they wanted to report a particular completion of part of a project?
No, so I believe that Mr. Dorado misspoke or is recalling the talking point a little differently. So one of the points of contention was mandatory requirement for CROs to immediately notify the council upon the completion of any step in the SARA process. The issue that the department had with that language was that we were worried if there was a delay in a notification, that it could be subject now to misconduct because it did not follow the general order, and then now the CRO is subject to discipline. And now where that would arise is, let's say, for example, a response step in a project is to conduct a certain type of enforcement. And because of the time element of when this crime occurs, CROs are working on a weekend in order to do an operation, to do whatever type of abatement they do. So they complete that, and they're working on their day off, and that step is now done. Is it incumbent on the CROs to now go back to the office, complete administrative work in the SARA database, and then push out notification and a summary of the closure of a step immediately because that's what policy says, or is it okay for them to come in on their Monday, complete the admin work, type up an appropriate summary, and then push that out? So that was the contention. The department's concern was if we have such specific verbiage that says upon the completion of any step in a SARA project, CRO has to immediately notify council. We were worried that, they do an operation on a weekend, a step is complete, but they don't push out notification until the following Monday. Are they then subject to discipline as a result of not following that exact step? So the verbiage that we agreed upon is here on this document up top here, where the progress of the council priorities, they're presented in a manner that are determined not in a set way that's codified in policy, but more empowering to the CRO and the specific neighborhood council that they determine the best way in which those priorities are delivered. So one neighborhood council may prefer verbal updates that are done during their monthly meetings. Another may like an email notification. And so we felt it important to allow for more flexibility between specific neighborhood councils and CROs to best determine how notifications of project updates are done versus making a hard line set way that it has to be done. And now it leaves CROs subject to potential discipline if it's done according to policy.
I see. I think we're unfortunately bumping against this issue of trust that was referred to by Commissioner Garcia Acosta. And I don't know how we're going to resolve this.
So in the last ad hoc, that was the compromise that we made. And the question that we kind of kept asking ourselves whenever we hit an impasse was what's our goal here? What are we looking for? And so with this notification component, the goal was how are we ensuring that the neighborhood councils are being updated on the work of the CROs. And I think the language that we settled on in the ad hoc was, it is important that they receive updates, but those updates are probably best decided by the council themselves and the CROs versus making like one mandatory way of notification that a CRO has to follow in policy, and instead let the relationship between the CRO and the council dictate how those updates are delivered. Because there's some that maybe don't want the updates to be done in any other way aside from verbally at a meeting. Because if stuff is pushed out, let's say, for example, council pushes out an update that is given by a CRO in an email, then they don't get anybody showing up to the meetings because people are showing up to the meetings because they want to hear for themselves at that point, right? So there are a myriad of reasons as to why a certain beat or neighborhood council would want updates delivered a certain way. And the verbiage that we settled on in the ad hoc allows that flexibility for the neighborhood council and the CRO to determine what's best for that beat in terms of the delivery of project updates.
Yeah, that's definitely helpful. And I think it definitely makes a difference to have that more flexibility, greater flexibility. It seems to me that the trust issue comes in terms of whether you have one per beat or you have one per area, and whether the needs of the councils will still get served to anywhere near the same degree. It seems a pretty stark difference between one per beat and one per area.
Yes, understood. And echoing what Mr. Garcia Acosta said, I will be bringing these concerns back to executive command. And again, I think for everybody, because I think there are folks who may not have been in the last one. I'll push out the the policy. You guys can see it as it's written, and the department verbiage for the point that we're talking about, and the community's verbiage of the point we're talking about. And then you guys can also peruse the rest of it, where it does talk about, again, time allocation for CROs, how that is accounted for, how that's being reported, and hopefully that helps to express kind of the work that was done in the last ad hoc to meet these things. I do think there is something to be said about the compromise that we did reach, and how the project number for the neighborhood council priorities is really the only major point of contention at this point.
Right. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. So I don't think that the ad hoc would is going to have a meeting before the 25th, which is the next commission meeting. So it looks like these issues are going to come before the commission that you are bringing. So this helps to educate more of the commissioners about what the issue is when it comes
Sure.
on the 25th.
And I do think once I push these documents out, that I really don't think there's much of a need for these continual ad hoc meetings on community policing. I think we've reached essentially a consensus sans this one sticking point, and I think it's something that we can continue to discuss in like via email, or if we need to make an impromptu meeting or schedule a separate meeting with this ad hoc, we can do it as well. But I think that communication just via like an email thread should hopefully suffice moving forward.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Then I guess we can move to the next item. Is the July the 31st forum. You informed me, Lieutenant Toribio, that the lead presentation on the pursuit policy will be made by Sergeant Urquiza, and with the help of Captain Osmos.
Yes. Yeah, it'll be Urquiza who will be the primary spokesperson on the department's behalf, but there'll be a couple other members who are more educated and kind of have vehicle pursuits in our policy on that as kind of an expertise, who will be able to speak. I'm sorry. Can I see that we have Mr. Garcia Costa, Commissioner Rouse, Commissioner Jackson. Is there somebody, I see somebody labeled as Oakland Police Commission. I can't remember who that was, just so I can.
That's Micah, Chief of Staff.
Oh,
yeah.
Got it. Gotcha.
Yeah, and she went today to the 81st Avenue Library to make sure that all the things were. I would greatly appreciate what she did today and straighten out all the logistics for that meeting on the 31st.
You're very welcome, Commissioner.
Also, I asked the IG's office to talk about comparisons between the pursuit policy in Oakland and the pursuit policy in other comparable communities. So I think Joseph McAuliffe, one of the analysts there, will also be presenting. So those will be the main presentations on the pursuit policy, relating to the Oakland pursuit policy. I don't know if anyone has any other questions about what we would be doing there. My thinking was that we would not take verbal questions from the audience. We would ask folks to write their questions on a card or some mechanism like that. This is a hot issue. I don't want people to get up and try to dominate the meeting with their presentations around the issue. I think the department has been working on this issue for some time. I think they put a lot of energy and effort to it, and I think it is in generally as good as it gets, but we've been asked to review it, and that's what we're going to do. Go ahead, Commissioner Jackson.
Yes, no problem. I recognize I won't be able to be there, but I'd like to offer a couple of suggestions.
Please.
Typically, when we do forums, we'll have at least one subject matter expert from outside of the department. Let's say we like some other pursuit policies. We could ask someone from that city, Alameda, San Leandro, Cleveland, I don't know, if they could speak about their policy, how it's been impactful, and what nuances it may have. You're just about 2 weeks out, so I think it's probably still possible, more so if it's an entity that's in this general area. Even BART, so I would just recommend that we ask some folks. I know we have some contacts in San Francisco, at BART, and I think in LA and Cleveland. I'm just not sure whose policy you want to have referenced.
I definitely appreciate that. San Francisco, as I understand it, has gone back and forth recently. The mayor has asked for some increase in aggressiveness by adding, I don't know, robberies or something, burglaries to the list of violations that could be pursued. And it's still controversial in San Francisco. It's controversial in a number. San Leandro also recently made some changes. So I don't know which ones we would pursue. I will talk to Joseph McAuliffe to see if he has some ideas of in terms of the research that he's already started on what another outside agency might be able to offer something.
Yeah, Joe is very thorough, so he is the best one. Yeah.
All right. Then I think we're pretty much set then for the 31st, unless someone has some other information offered. And I also want to welcome Lieutenant Soto to joining us.
Yes, hi, this is Acting Lieutenant Soto. I'm in charge of SRS units out in BFO 2.
Thank you. So you're going to be a regular attendee in the ad hoc at this point?
I'm not exactly sure. I do manage some CROs. I am kind of newer to the position, so I'm just kind of getting familiar. But I think more so I'm just trying to I'm here to get familiar with the changes in the policy and I guess those kinds of things.
Thank you for being here, sir.
Yeah, Commissioner, Tom will be looped in for all things kind of CRO policy related. And then when it transitions over to J4, it'll be a different group of folks. But I know that there's a significant point that still needs to be resolved for the CRO stuff, but I don't believe that this is going to be like we discussed earlier, it's not going to be lengthy continual ad hoc meetings on it, but just given his position, I felt it important to loop him in along with Lieutenant Kim, who I think might be logged in as Sergeant Man Guy here.
Right. Okay. Very good. So I think that's all we need to discuss in terms of the July the 31st, I'll talk to Joseph McKellough, see if we might invite someone else from outside. I know the San Francisco Chronicle did an extensive piece on pursuit policy. They also looked at a number of different communities, mostly just to lay out a lot of the problems that had happened in pursuits in other communities, not talking about what their policies were or any changes that they've made in their policy. They're not, they don't make presentations. The reporters who did that very thorough study. It was suggested that there is a document that we might try to get to folks also. What's it called? The Vehicular Pursuits, a guide for law enforcement executives on managing the associated risk, published by COPS and the Police Executive Research Forum. I can try to also get a link to that sent out to folks before the 31st, so that we can get a better feel for the heft of all of the issues that are involved in what we'll be talking about.
Commissioner Riles, a couple of things. I'll follow up with you offline to find out exactly what expectation you want to set for the community for the 31st. And then that way,
Okay.
We can either announce it then, or I could try to, let's see, where can I put it before? Maybe I'll put it on the website. So at least we have it there and then we can touch on it when we get there. And then also, I know that there's, I think it's Lieutenant Mangai's name, but it's not Lieutenant Mangai. Who has logged in to his name so I can make sure I capture the right person?
Hey, sorry, I don't know why that happened. It's Eric Kim. I'm the lieutenant for
Thank you,
Special
Eric.
Resources West, which also covers the CROs and CRTs and Foot Patrol.
Perfect. And it's not your fault. You just didn't have your own login. So thank you very much for confirming that.
No problem.
Welcome, Lieutenant
Yeah,
Kim.
thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you for
I'm
having me.
sorry, Chair.
Yes.
I imagine that on Thursday, you're going to again announce the forum and maybe have a flyer or something that we can be distributing. But you might ask people to follow up with you directly with questions in advance, such that some might be able to be addressed in the forum. And that way people can actually feel like you've invited their participation, you've paid attention to their participation. And while we can't always get to every question, that there is a concerted effort to try and respond.
That's a very good idea. Okay. We'll definitely do that. So just for the last issue to just briefly touch on tonight, as I said earlier, these ad hocs are not standing committees. They're set up to deal with specific issues for certain periods of time. If we have a standing committee of the commission, we have to get approval from the city council to have a standing committee. So we haven't done that. But I'd like to see if while we have this ad hoc, we can get into some of the issues of the decline, the disappearance of the neighborhood councils to work with our community resource officers. They've always been a precious few, and recently they've been declining. I know that the renewal of Measure Z that's coming up in November also, rather than focusing the resources from that parcel tax on community resource officers, it's allowing it more flexibility to be spread throughout the department. And that makes me a little fearful that the resources to community resource officers are going to decline, and I wouldn't want that to happen. So I want to see if we can spend some time on trying to get a handle on that and working with the other side of the neighborhood councils in terms of the civilian staff and the whatever progress that I understood was being made in order to start some new neighborhood councils. Because I think that's an important crime prevention mechanism for our community that we shouldn't let go. So I'm want to spend some time on that, and hope I can get the support of my fellow commissioners in terms of doing that. I'll try to draft something up around that for Marcia Peterson for our chairperson. Are there any other issues that anyone wants to bring up for tonight?
Nothing on OPD's end. I do just want to make sure that kind of circling back to make sure the deliverable here. So after it'll probably be tomorrow morning sometime. I'll push out to everybody here the the policy in like a clean format, and it'll have the differing language for subsection E for the section on CROs that talks about the projects. Also, Commissioner. Based on Commissioner Garcia Costa and a couple other folks mentioned it as well, bringing the community's concerns to the executive team, looking for a sort of compromise on this and understanding the different levels from where the community is coming from. One, in terms of having a voice of which projects are being done in a SARA format, and also to establish the trust that the CROs are working to what the council is pushing forward. So I'll push all that forward, and then I'll keep everybody in the loop on the executive team's response to that. And I think we could just look if it can't be resolved in discussions via email, that we reconvene as an ad hoc. But I have those as my deliverables, so I'll be doing all that going forward.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Lieutenant Uribe. Go ahead, Commissioner Jackson. Did you have something?
Oh, I was going to ask what our goal is in getting the pursuit policy before the commission.
So the goal is to fulfill the council's request to review the policy. So we'll be drafting up a report after the forum on our review of Oakland's policy, and the commission then would review that report from the ad hoc in order to get it back to the city council in September, early September.
Okay, so that means that it would go before the commission the second week in August? I mean, a second meeting in August, which will be
That's what I was thinking, yeah.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I just think in terms of commission meetings, so.
Sure, sure. Mhm.
Thank you.
Chair,
All right.
before we wrap this meeting up, in regards to Measure Z, let me know anything that I can do to be helpful in terms of getting more context, looking at the actual ballot measure text. I think I have that somewhere. But I know there's also a coalition of community-based partners that are also really deeply involved with Measure Z, and maybe it'd be good to engage them a little bit too, to see what the implications of it would have on community policing as well, to address some of your concerns.
Great, I appreciate that. Uh-huh.
But we could talk.
Yeah, we'll do that. We'll do that. All right, thank you, everybody, and we'll see you all soon, I'm sure. Try to stay cool and calm. There's a lot. There's too much going on.
Thank you, everyone.
All right,
Thank you.
bye-bye.
Yeah, everyone, good night.